Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about the future of Retribution Paladin's damage after this rework that we got in 10.0.7. So, on this channel, I've been saying it the whole time, and it sounded crazy in 10.07 when Ret was really strong, but this damage is not going to scale very well, is what I kept saying. It's what I keep saying. It's very obvious thing when your class scales well with Verse that your class isn't scaling at all. And so I decided to actually break this down with numbers and take a look at some other specs. I didn't go through every spec, but I went through some ones that made sense for me to go through. I went through a lot of specs though, like 3, 6, I have 3, 6, 9, 10, 10 listed here. I went through probably 15, 16 of the specs to kind of get an idea of how bad it actually is for Ret. And this is for single target raid, right? This is the best way just to, figure out your class's damage, your specs damage, or whatever, is the very core, the most basic thing. Single target, patchwork, raid. Obviously, things change in Mythic Plus, things change with other things like that. Some other things I want to point out is this is from 10.07, so the height of Ret power, till 10.1, right before 10.1.5. Right? So with the patch, first of all, there's a lot of buffs, which actually skews these numbers even worse for Ret in some ways. But there's also the augmentation evoker being introduced, which kind of skews some of the numbers on Warcraft logs because not everything is going to the augmentation evoker yet that's supposed to. And so some of the numbers are a little bit inflated right now and not something you should really take as super accurate as far as what the actual damage the class is bringing. Now, at some point that's going to be settled, and Ret might benefit more from augmentation evokers because of our cooldowns and stuff like that, and that should be noted as well, and that should be taken into account. However, just to keep it completely fair, I also did not include external buffs at all. So there's no power infusion included here, which obviously makes it much worse for certain classes to make. And Ret is not a power infusion class, so this makes it much more pronounced even. But I did not include that, to be fair, because I'm also not including augmentation evoker. I just want to talk about specifically how the spec is getting stronger on its own, not externally. I did include trinkets though, because we are going to have trinkets, but the trinket increase from season 1 to season 2 was very substantial, like 5% more trinket damage basically, or more. I didn't actually calculate out the numbers exactly because I could not find the old sims for Blazebinder's Hoof. But the number one thing used in single target was Blazebinder's Hoof with either a Grief Torch or a Mythic Spiteful Storm. And between the two of those, you were basically getting an anvil, basically a little bit more than an anvil with the Blazebinder Hoof strength proc or whatever. You were actually getting a little bit more, but not much. And so you then have the beacon damage on top of that, right? So this is a lot more trinket damage from season 1 to season 2. Now, of course, from season 2 to season 3, that same trinket damage could be increased again. That's completely possible. So I did keep trinkets in there. That's also going to inflate like the Windwalker Monk, for example, who also uses versatility and uses 2 damage trinkets that are very similar damage profile as the Ret trinkets. But you can see the Windwalker is actually even still at a better place than Ret. Some of that's because of buffs they received as well, whereas Ret has not received any buffs since 10.0.7, except for the 2% buff that was just to cancel out the rings being nerfed, right? The Fire Ring and the Amulet being nerfed. 2% buff, that was just to cancel that out essentially. No actual buffs since then. So let's take a look at this and see what we see. Now you can see right here, Unholy DK is actually a lower increase than Ret. Now, of course, this is a PI target. So with PI, Unholy DK was still doing more than Ret in 10.07, and it of course is now still doing more. It's actually the number one thing with PI now for a single target because it's just so strong on pull and everything like that. So Unholy DK, it's a little bit of an outlier one where it would be better if I included PI, but I didn't. I also then, so for over here on this right side, I only put whatever the best spec of that class is. So I don't have Fire Mage and Arcane Mage because Frost Mage had a nice jump there. And it's not even the best. Like, I think Fire Mage, I don't want to speak anything incorrectly here. I can't, because I looked at stuff after the buffs as well, 10.1.5. I'm not exactly sure, but Frost Mage was the one that I chose here just to kind of fit it in. And just to kind of make almost a chart to show you the difference here. So from season 1 to season 2, 10.07 to 10.1, right before 10.1.5, not counting any external buffs, there's been about a 27% increase on patchwork DPS. I should note with the bosses I used as well. I tried to be the most fair as I could. I used Taros Mythic and I used Magmarax Mythic. I thought about using Rashok Mythic, but I decided to go with Magmarax Mythic. Taros and Magmarax as the single target bosses to use this from. And so Rhett saw a 27% increase in that, which doesn't sound too bad until you're looking at everybody else's. Frost Mage, 34% increase. Again, this is before 10.1.5. Subtlety Rogue, 38% increase. Shadow Priest, 39. Demon Lock, 39. Frost DK, 39. Windwalker Monk, 39. You can see a lot of it is in this high 30s. And then Marksman Hunter, 40%. So a lot of it seems to be about this 40% marker. Fury Warrior DH were some outliers, way up at 45%. There could have been more outliers as well. Again, I did every one of these classes. So I did Paladin, Mage, Rogue, Priest, Lock, Frost, or DKs, both DKs, Windwalker, Hunters, Warriors, and Demon Hunters. So like down here, you can see Arms Warrior was only 33%. So that fits more into like that Frost Mage range. But the idea is that one DPS spec out of your kit, I guess, is viable. Now, I know that's not fair to some people. Some people only like playing Beast Mastery Hunter. Some people only like playing Survival Hunter. And so it's not fair to say, well, the Marks Hunters are really strong because you don't want to play that. But I do know that that's kind of how Blizzard looks at it. They're not going to... It has happened like with Warlocks and I think with Hunters at some point. But they typically try to have all, and with Rogues. So they do, it does happen, but they do usually nerf it pretty quickly. When like all 3 of your DPS specs from that class are at the very top, they're usually going to nerf that so that only one of them is at the top. That's just the way it is. It's not necessarily fair, but like if you have all the best DPS specs on one class, it's just not very healthy at all for the game. So I do understand why they do it, even if it sucks for those of you who don't have class identity, but you have spec identity. I totally get that as a Ret Paladin. Like I identify way more with Ret than I do with Holy or Pry, even though I do like Holy Paladin. It's one of my favorite healers to play, but I totally get it, basically. So basically what you can expect to see, so let's say the Trinket, because Ret doesn't scale very well with stats, right? We're verse scaling. So what you could expect to see is if the Trinket proliferation, whatever, the Trinket damage is the same, damage allocation is the same, from season 1 to season 2 to season 2 to season 3, I would just expect to see another about 27% increase from season 2 to season 3 next patch. In 10.2, I mean. And the same thing with these with some of the other specs. However, some of these specs have gotten buffs as well, which is also like DH has got a buff, I believe. So that 45% is actually like way high. They didn't need that big of a buff, essentially. Maybe they overshot a little bit there, but they're in a good place now. So all these other classes got a lot stronger now. Again, a lot of these got buffs. Windwalker Monk got a little bit of a buff. Some of these things got a little buffs here and there. Not a ton like in Windwalker's case, but they did get a little bit of a buff. This is before 10.1.5 buffs. I can't stress that enough, though, where some of these classes got even more buffs. And Shadow Priest also got nerfed, so they might not be quite at 39% anymore. This could have been, before their nerf, right? So, these numbers are fluid, but the point I would want you to take away is just how different the number is. Ret's the only one in the 20s as far as one that has only one spec to play. That's not to mean that that's the only one in the game. I didn't do Shamans. Maybe Enhancement Shaman's only in the 20s. Maybe Ellie Shaman's only in the 20s. But there's only a few specs that are in this really big trouble. We can actually look at the other Warlocks as well. Destrolock only at 26. And then where's Aflock at? Aflock only at 19. So Aflock, that's one that you could maybe see. Again, all locks are technically PI targets, but you could maybe see them being like, oh, well, we need some buffs, right? But they actually suffer for the same thing as Ret in that they were very strong beforehand, and so they didn't get any kind of buffs. But I would expect to see some buffs coming in for Aflac, and maybe there even was in 10.1.5. I don't know, but I don't know every single spec off the top of my head. Although I do know quite a few, I do not know every single one. So maybe Aflac did get a buff in 10.1.5 already. If not, I would expect to see that coming based on these numbers. I would definitely expect to see that. So, and whereas I would expect, these other classes to get similar, to go up similarly the next patch as well. So what's that going to do? It's going to create a even larger gap. So Ret, if you look here at 105, 200, that is a very high number without any kind of external buffs. It might even be the highest, if not one of the highest numbers without any external buffs that I looked at. Arms was a little bit higher, it looks like. Yeah, it was one of the highest numbers. So Ret was very, very strong, right? In 10.07, fresh off the rework, right? And everyone said, Ret's too strong, Ret's too strong, Ret's too strong. And I'm over here on my channel saying, no, it's not. And anyone who wasn't a Ret is telling me I'm an idiot, and some Rets are telling me I'm an idiot. And I'm telling you that this is not good. So we're gonna see this. So we're gonna see this number go up even by a low amount again, whereas other people's go up by a higher amount. How do we deal with this? So let's just put it to bed. Ret is not scaling well. I think we can safely say that without getting too much pushback at this point. We now see Ret when Wowhead puts their DPS rankings up. Ret is now towards the bottom. Actually, might have it up. I'll just pull it over. If I do, let's see, can I just pull this over? Oh, yeah. So if we look at this picture here, you can see, Ret's towards the bottom. Sometimes it's even lower than that, right? And whereas at 10.07, if you would have looked at this, it would have been near the top, right? So, well, I don't think it's a refutable thing anymore to say that Ret is not scaling very well. We have results. I have my numbers that I came up with here. We have Wildhead's numbers. We can look at all kinds of numbers to say that Ret is not scaling very well throughout this patch, right? The same thing is going to happen next patch. And so because of that, like right now, Ret could probably use a 10% buff to kind of move up into the middle range, maybe a 5% buff or a buff, 5-10% or a buff right now just to be competitive. Now imagine when that gap goes up another 10%. So you're talking about a 15 to 20% buff Ret needs for next patch to be, middle of the pack or let's just say top half or top third, right? A 15 to 20% aura buff. That is incredibly large. And I think the devs have really dropped the ball by not doing a minor buff in this patch, because what's going to happen is Ret is going to either be so bad at the beginning of 10.2, like after the first week or two of 10.2 when people start getting gear, Ret's either going to be so bad it's going to be the lowest DPS like ever in the game, or they're going to finally realize it and give it like a 15 or 20% buff, and everyone's gonna be like, what the heck? And then Ret's gonna appear to be strong again. And it's the aura buff is not solving the issue. What needs to happen is, and I've seen other people talk about this to give them credit. I can't think of their names to give them specific credit, but I have seen people talk about this. And the easiest way to do that is just to make Mastery do something for Ret. Right now, Mastery is pretty much worthless. If you just increase the efficiency of Mastery, so like the damage per point of Mastery, basically, this would give us a stat to scale with without even having to redo the rework or anything like that. You could just simply buff the amount of damage we get from our Mastery, or the amount of points of Mastery we get per Mastery on our gear or whatever, right? So if you enhance that and you do that by a proper amount, that first of all puts us in line and then also scales appropriately, which is it is a hard mark to hit, of course, but you can hit this mark. If you hit that mark, then you'll all of a sudden will be a class that is viable and can also scale. And the part that worries me the most is, right, why does this matter? Because relying on like a 15% or 10% aura buff every single patch is not viable, because when is that buff going to come in? Is that buff going to come in after everyone's already done for the season, like doing stuff, and like like only the hardcore players are left playing? Because a lot of people only play for a month or two, or maybe even 3 months, and then they take a break or whatever. That's just how a lot of people play WoW these days. So is the buff not going to come in until then? And then you're just, it's very unfulfilling as a player to have that happen. You need to feel like you can play your spec at the beginning of a patch. And so basically, in my opinion, the devs have until this next patch, 10.1.7, right? This holiday revamp patch, to seriously give Ret a look. Hopefully, maybe redesign the mastery. That would be the best case scenario. Or literally give like a 10% aura buff if they're not prepared to like kind of get more into the specs minutia. And then also be prepared to do that same 10% or 5% aura buff right at the beginning of 10.2 as well. And yes, Ret will then look strong for the beginning of that patch. But again, it'll move down a little bit by the end of the patch. And then you're going to get to 10.3 and you're going to have the same problem again. You're going to need another 5 to 10% aura buff on top of that. So again, those the 5 to 10%, those are just, you know, hypothetical numbers, but it's something like that, right? It's something like that. So this is it's a dire straits right now for Ret as far as damage goes. I think it's worth pointing to. I should have said this earlier. Is I don't want to just sacrifice all of our new defensive capabilities to be a middle of the pack damage, right? If my choice is to be low damage but be built like a tank, then I'll choose low damage built like a tank. If the other option is middle of the pack damage but die all the time, which is what we were before the rework, right? I still think the rework's a net gain. I'm still very pro rework, because before we weren't a glass cannon, we were like a glass water pistol. We were made of glass and we did nothing, right? We were terrible. Now we are a titanium water pistol. Our damage is very low, but we're very tanky. We're very, very strong. And if I'm going to be a water pistol, I prefer to be the tanky one, right? What I think I'm hoping for here is just a little bit of the non-reliance of the aura buff. So what I'm really hoping for is that we get this mastery looked at. We get something looked at as far as scaling with our stats, because right now it's just not a good feeling. Like I said, especially, so let's say we go into 10.2 with no buffs. We're the lowest DPS by a mile on the bottom of the WoW head rankings. Lowest DPS by a mile. And and then they give us a 20% aura buff at 10.2.5. I mean, that's gonna feel great for that little fleeting moment there for sure. But you have felt so bad, or you already quit the game before that. You've already quit the game because it feels so awful to hit that weak, and to get new gear and to not get stronger feels awful. So hopefully people see this video, because I think this is very important. It's something I've been trying to talk about since the rework happened, while still being appreciative of the rework, by still liking the tankiness. I don't want to be the top damage. If you're a dev watching this, I'm not saying I want to be top damage and be tanky. I'm saying DHs are tanky and they got 45% stronger. I'm saying subtlety rogues are tanky and they got 38% stronger. So maybe you can bump us up to that subtlety rogue thing, which is literally over 10%, so a 10% buff, right? That's more what I'm saying, right? Is, can we be at least in line with the other tanky classes as far as damage goes? That maybe that's what I'm saying here. Is I'm not asking to be the best, but I'm asking to not be the weakest by far, and to feel bad and not want to play the game. I'll still be playing probably, but a lot of people are going to quit if this is what it's going to be. So that's my passionate diatribe on this. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel, because it helps me out so much. And other than that, everybody have a good one.